When I hire a new human employee, there's a reason for the job. There's a why behind the job. There's a clear motivation for success in that job. It just hit me one day. What if I treat this digital worker the same way? This is an employee. And that led to a lot of ahas.
When leaders were trying to say we need to deploy an agent, what happened when they got that framing wrong?
They treated it like an IT project. But what they were actually trying to get wasn't the behavior of an IT project. What they were trying to get was the behavior of an employee. AI is here. It's not going away. You got to figure out how you're going to embrace it, how you're going to use it, because if you don't, your competitors are.
Welcome to Disruptor Confessions. I'm your host, John Ayers. 2025 was the year of failed AI pilots, proof of concepts that were abandoned, and experiments that didn't work. 2026 is going to have to be different. 2026 will be the year when executives will have to decide whether AI agents become real workers or just another failed initiative. Today's guest is someone who isn't just building AI agents, he's actually running them inside his company, and he's doing it at scale. He calls it his digital workforce. Brandon Metcalf is a CEO and founder of Asymbl, a workforce orchestration company. He helps organizations design hybrid teams where humans and digital workers operate as one. Inside Asymbl itself, digital workers are already accounting for meaningful scale and share of productivity. And as he'll tell us, they're growing fast. This conversation today on Disruptor Confessions is for executives who are done with experimentation they were doing in 25, and they're ready to execute. They're ready to make AI agents have impact on their business. This episode is also for the rest of us, those of us trying to make sense of AI agents, trying to make sense of a digital workforce, what it means for our jobs, for our teams, and for our future. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, John. I'm super excited to talk.
Listen, we met at Dreamforce. We're both in very closely related to the Salesforce space. And you gave a talk around this topic, and I thought, okay, Brandon's actually executing it. He's actually delivering agents. Before we get into that, because that's going to be really the thrust of this conversation, I want to start with you. How did you get into it?
Yeah, so it's not what I ever thought I'd be doing, but it's certainly in love with what I'm doing. It's an incredible time to be not only building companies, but to be on the forefront of what we really feel is a new category in business of workforce orchestration. So I started building my first software company in 2009 on Salesforce. It was recruiting software called Talent Rover. Ended up scaling that, 9 offices, 8 countries, which I think is going to be relevant for this conversation. 9th fastest growing software company in America in 2017, sold it in 18, started a couple new endeavors. One of those endeavors was a company called Blueprint Advisory, which was a Salesforce consulting firm. My partner, top exec at Talent Rover, came over and ran Blueprint on the day-to-day as I was focusing on a different venture. And then we got approached by Salesforce a couple of years ago at Blueprint to say, hey, we want you to build a different type of recruiting system, a new modern one that works differently than the way my previous one worked. And we started doing that. And, eventually I came over full time to what has became Asymbl. So Blueprint started building that application. We spun it off, created Asymbl, and then Asymbl ended up buying Blueprint. So now it's all Asymbl. So now we do software and services together. But, a couple of years ago, we started to get exposure to ChatGPT. Salesforce invited us to be in beta program for what at the time was Einstein Copilot. So we started to get our hands on AI. We started to get it on from a product standpoint, like what can we do in recruiting with Einstein Copilot, because the new product, the Asymbl Recruiter Suite's built on Salesforce as well. But then also I was really personally invested and started building my own GPTs and really started to develop a belief in what this technology could do. And then we just evolved from there into what we're doing now, which has been a fun story and really making a big impact where, today at Asymbl, we pretty much have 3 lines of businesses that make up workforce orchestration. And I think they're all essential to workforce orchestration. So we have workforce applications or recruiting software, if you will, that is really focused on helping companies hire their humans, which I think is going to become even more challenging with the demand and the change in jobs that AI going to force and it has already started force. But then we also have this digital labor side of our business where we help companies deploy digital labor, onboard them, if you will. But then we also build our own agents and things like that as well for our customers. Like we have a recruiter agent that goes with recruiting software. And then we have this huge Salesforce consulting practice, which really is the glue of how do we make all of this work. And through those three different business lines, we get to see customers in a variety of different phases or different focal points. Like some customers come to us strictly for recruiting software, and then we expand into the others. Some were coming to us strictly for Salesforce consulting, and we expand. But now we're seeing a huge demand for companies coming to us for digital labor, and then we expand into the others. And it really is to your point about how do we create this hybrid workforce of really empowering and enabling more productivity at a business, driving better results faster, reducing overhead and costs. Like I can talk about some of our metrics that we're doing internally as well. But it's a fundamental shift in how work is done and where the future of work actually goes. And it's a lot of fun. And not only are we deploying this for our customers, we drink our own champagne. We're doing all of this first, and we've been doing this for years. So we've got a really deep lived experience perspective of how this works. We failed a lot, we succeeded a lot, but that's how all this works. And I'm excited to get into it with you.
First of all, thanks for that background and kind of how you got here. One of the things I want to kind of poke at a little bit is this an IT challenge, right? Is this an IT problem or more almost an HR problem? And I think you kind of have a perspective on that. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Talk a little bit about that realization in your own mind that you saw some friction there, maybe in 24, 25 coming into this digital labor.
Yeah, I mean, when we first started to think about this internally, and I started to get this deep understanding, deep belief that this is real, this is tangible, this can drive powerful impact to a business. And we started to execute and use it, and we started to see some of that. We had to figure out like, okay, well, what exactly is the value we're getting and how are we getting this value? And 2025 was the headline of agents. Everything's an agent. And I make fun of this a lot. I'm like, you can't just slap an agent on everything. And not everything's an agent. There's what I call agent washing of, sometimes you have generative AI that's not agentic and people are calling it agents. So that's led to a lot of confusion in the market. I think that's where we see a lot of the concern and a lot of the unclarity of like, where do I go with this? How do I get started? How do I get value? What is it? And, for my world and for us, like we really tried to leverage it as technology. And then we were getting frustrated. Like it would break. It wouldn't do something the same way every single time. And then we started to change the way we thought about it. It's like, well, wait, this isn't like just a mail merge type thing where you tell it exactly what to do and it's going to go do that exactly. We have great technology that already does that. This can think. This can give you perspective. This can challenge you. This can elevate the way you think. This will also respond to feedback you give it in a way that isn't the same way technology would respond. Like I'm not going in and changing filters and all of that. I'm actually having a conversation in natural language with this technology for it to evolve. And when that started to click for me, I'm like, wait, this is an employee. Like this is the same behavior that I have when I hire a new employee.
Okay, I got to ask you about that. Was there a moment? Was there a day? Was there an incident? Do you remember that day or that moment when that clicked?
I think it compounded over time. And I think it was from frustration. Yeah. I think it was frustration with the GPTs of like, why can't you do what I want, how I want it to do? And then also other times being surprised and was like, whoa, this is really good. I wasn't thinking this way. How did you figure this out? Where did you get this information from? Is this real? How do I validate this? And it was from trying and failing and me using it personally as the CEO of the company of how can I impact my work to move faster, to have more depth, to respond more clearly, to communicate better, all of those things. So it was through trial and error. I think in 2024 is probably when it really clicked for me. And then I started to bring others into the fold in the company. My co-founder started to bring him in of like, hey, this is what we're doing. Check this out. This is where we can use this for. And then again, at the same time, our product team was working with Salesforce, and we were in these pilots and doing all of that and learning like very futuristic tech at that time, because it was, I mean, Agentforce was literally being built in front of us. And I don't know, I guess timing, a perspective, not afraid to take a risk, kind of led to giving us the insights. But then it really was taking a step back going, why is it functioning the way it's functioning? And then it just hit me one day of like, this is an employee. Like, let me treat it like an employee. Let me see what happens if I coach it. Let me see what happens if I manage it. What if I give it a job to be done and not just a series of tasks? Like when I hire a new human employee, there's a reason for the job. There's a why behind the job. There's a clear motivation for success in that job. What if I treat this digital worker the same way? What if I put that lens, not, how much are we consuming and all these IT budgetary things that people are thinking about with agents? What if I look at it from a labor and like an actual employee? What if I, on the P&L, and I created this in our P&L to do this, what if I treat it like headcount? What can it do for me? And then what kind of impact is it driving? And that led to a lot of ahas. So much so we went out and hired a chief digital labor officer, which is a new term, where his name is Shiv. He's a human. And Shiv's whole job is to deploy digital workers across our company internally. Today we have, I don't know, it's constantly adding more. We have I think about 130 that I was told at the beginning of this week. I think the last time you and I talked a couple of weeks ago, we had like 120. So
120 AI agents deployed working alongside employees.
We have 130 digital workers. And this is really a nuanced way of saying that, but it's really important.
Yeah, please.
Not everything's an agent, and not everything needs to be an agent. We also have assistants. So for me, I live in Slack, Claude, and ChatGPT. I actually just posted recently about the new Agent First for Sales inside of ChatGPT, and actually showed our pipeline. And when I was asking it questions about how should I feel about our pipeline right now? What should I be happy about? What should I be concerned about? And you see on this video that I posted on LinkedIn, this whole exchange with me and this assistant. And it's giving me information about our actual pipeline. It's pulling up records. It's enabling me to have a similar conversation that I would have with our CRO without having a conversation with our CRO, where I was working and when I was working on it, so I could get the answers I needed right away. So for us, that's a form of a digital worker. That's not an agent. That's an assistant. So this is where it gets blurry, and why I think the term agent and everything being an agent is actually making it harder for people to really understand how to unlock this as a workforce.
Brandon, I want to double click into that, but I think there's some meaty conversation there. So I want to just, before we do, because I think the personas, I'm actually pretty deep into the agentic persona concept and how human personas and agent personas need to be really thought through at scale before you can start just building out an agent. So I want to kind of get into how you see that. So we'll circle back on that. I also want to kind of ask your thoughts on what happened in 2025. And the reason I asked that is, I think we treated AI, we treated ChatGPT and Gemini and Claude, we treated Agentforce, we treated it like a shiny new tool. We would kind of saw it in 24, 25. It's like, hey, let's build an agent. We treated it like a new shiny object, right? What broke? What broke when leaders were trying to say we need to deploy an agent? What happened when they got that framing wrong?
They treat it like an IT project, and it's a blurry line. Like, this is technology. This is IT stuff. There's data, there's architecture, there's all of that stuff that goes into it. But what they were actually trying to get wasn't the behavior of an IT project. What they were trying to get was the behavior of an employee. They wanted something that could reason and think and do things for them without them necessarily having to build every single step of the process for them to do it.
Give me an example. Give me an example in 25, it could have been something you guys worked on or something you read or observed, just to give it some more concrete use case, tangible. Give me an example of that.
I'll give you two. So sales, SDR. So sales development reps, usually a junior level position in the sales organization, right? You usually hire someone, just usually fresh out of school, maybe 1-2 years experience, something like that. And the SDR, their whole job is to engage with leads and prospects, to qualify them, to see, are they the right customer profile for what our products and services can deliver? Are they actually a real buyer? Like, is there actually a need here, or are they kicking the tires and just seeing what's up? So how do we qualify them and disqualify them? And then how do we convince them to actually get engaged in the sales cycle if they meet all those requirements?
So they're Brandon, just for the listener, they're on phone calls, they're on emails, they're trying to drive pipeline, early stage engagement, right?
Yeah, where are the customers at? Trying to have those conversations and figure out, are you actually a buyer, and how do I get you in the sales cycle if you are, and how do I move you to a more senior level salesperson that can do demos and all of the other things that come after that. Typically a high volume role, typically a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, some texts, and all of that. And there's typically a defined process for how that happens, where here's the emails you can write, and here's how the messages gets formulated. And if you're dealing with a lot of leads, like 1,000 leads, like here's a mail merge thing where you can like populate their name in the email and do all of that stuff. And I think we've all gotten plenty of marketing emails and SDR emails from that. And then, when they engage with the prospect, answer questions, give insights, think through what the prospect is saying, to say, are they saying the right things that gives me confidence that, yes, they would buy something, and yes, we can actually solve their needs and help them. So there's a reasoning element into that. So we've always had, or tech has always been around for at least as long as I've been working, to help you automate some of those things. Like, someone clicks here, send them this. You go to a website, I'm speaking your language here with marketing, right? So you go to a website, fill in this lead form, and that lead form goes into the CRM. And then, if that prospect engages with the website more, we're going to start to score them and grade them, and we're going to do more marketing stuff for them. And, there's a whole process that goes on now. But what all of that did, or what all of that didn't do, I should say, is that it didn't do the reasoning. So it didn't do the actual conversation. It didn't have the conversation with that prospect of really going through and getting real time what they're saying, how they're saying it, interpreting it, and then making a decision as to what should happen. The automation that we have is prospects going to go and fill certain things in, and then the next step will happen, and the next step will happen, and the next step will happen based off of the information that's been populated. With the SDR agent who we brought on, who we named Theodore, his name's Theodore Frank. Teddy when he's doing a good job, and Theodore when he's not. And Teddy has good days and bad days. It now, I should say, engages with these prospects in a way that's not just having the prospect fill in fields. It's actually sending an email. And then when the prospect responds, reading what the prospect said and replying back without having a pre-built mail merged template that they're using. Teddy will write the whole email based off of what was said. That's very different from fill in these fields. You're going to get this canned email based off of that. So there's reasoning, there's thought in that. And then he's been programmed, coached to know, this is what we're looking for. These are buying signals. These are the types of conversations we want you to have. And then once you feel those are qualified, we want you to go ahead and work with the prospect to schedule a time to meet with a human AE, a human salesperson. Very different things going on, right? So instead of filling in a form, it going into a lead queue, that getting scored and graded and rated, if you will, and then a human getting a message of, hey, this prospect could be interesting, you should connect with them. Teddy, the SDR agent, is just doing it all. So very, very different. Another example that we have is in recruiting. So Asymbl, we launched the company in January 2023, and then we just kind of took off. In the beginning of 2025, we needed to hire about 100 people in about 100 days. And at the time we had 40 people in the company. So a lot of additional heads coming in. We had one recruiter. We eventually hired a second recruiter, but we had a 90-day time frame, if you will, three months, 100 days or so, to get all these people hired, because we had client obligations we had to deliver for. So, we could go out and hire a whole new recruiting team, but think about that process. You got to find the candidates, you got to interview the candidates, You got to get the candidate to accept. Candidate has to give notice, and then they can start. Oh, and then once they start, you got to train the candidate. You got to teach them what we're recruiting for, how we're recruiting. There's no way we could hire a whole recruiting team in 90 days. We could outsource it. We could go pay in an RPO firm or staffing firm a lot of money to do that. And there's definitely a lot of great firms that are out there that do that. We decided let's do this differently. Let's put a recruiting agent in the mix to elevate what our human recruiter did. So help us with pre-screening, help us with interview scheduling, help us with interview feedback, help us with coordinated communication with the candidate, keeping the candidate engaged and interested in all that, so that we could take a lot of the workload off the human, so the human could then focus on really getting into the details about how did the interview go, talking to the hiring manager, getting really solid feedback about what did you like, what did you not like, help me understand how to recruit someone who's perfect for this, and really getting to the human elements of recruiting. So, very different than just straight up workflow of a candidate coming in, applying to a job, getting a canned email back from the system, or, worst case in a lot of recruiting softwares, never hearing anything back from the company ever about the status of your application. And then waiting for something defined to happen for the next thing to happen. This is the difference of workflow automation and actual digital workers doing things.
On that note, so on the business development, sales development rep and this recruiting agent, can I ask you, is this like a whiteboard session? Or how are you unpacking to get at the meat, to get at the heart of what needs to actually be built and how it integrates with data across the process, the workflow? How do you go about that?
Yeah, and we are a tech company and we've been building tech for a long time, and we deeply understand how software is built and built successful software companies, and have this amazing relationship with Salesforce where we're getting in these beta programs, all this stuff. So we have an advantage of understanding that element of it versus just a non-technology business. But the technology alone, to our earlier point, if we just focused on the tech side of it, we would not have unlocked and solved what we actually solved. We're a company internally. We're a company trying to act like a company 100 times our size. And that's one of the reasons why we've grown at the incredible rate that we've grown and at the pace that we've had, because we have been able to act like that 100 times company. And a lot of it is because of the digital workers. So, for us, really understanding, okay, how is the sausage made, if you will, but how do you apply it? In going through and thinking about the SDR agent or the recruiter agent, or we have Poly People Ops, who's a People Ops digital worker. We have Casey Content, who's in the marketing department, who creates all this content. We have Data Dan that does data migration, the BA Ben that does business analyst work. We have an army of digital workers. The trick that helped normalize it for me, normalize it for the company, normalize it for every individual in our company to really get this, is we took the technology side out of it. And we said, what's the job we want to be done? Why does the job exist? And why do we have an SDR? What's the whole purpose of this job existing? What do we define as success? A good example in the recruiting world, an agent could be used to schedule interviews between a candidate and a hiring manager. Sounds pretty simple. It's just scheduling, doing all that, all the things that I said that the recruiter agent could do and help us with. What's the motivation for success, though, for getting that interview scheduled? So in our world, just scheduling the interview is great. That works perfect for us. The recruiter agent can do it. In other large companies, the recruiter, the human recruiter, may need to get insight and information from the hiring manager. And hiring managers are typically very busy people. And getting that person to talk to you can sometimes be a significant challenge. So in recruiting, and I used to do this back in my staffing days, when I get the hiring manager on the phone to schedule an interview with a candidate, one, they're going to take my call. They're going to want to talk to me because they want to get that candidate scheduled, because they want to get the rec filled. I would leverage that as opportunity to say, let's talk about all this other stuff that's going on. So my motivation in that situation for scheduling that candidate interview with the hiring manager was not actually the interview scheduling. It was the connection I needed to have with the hiring manager to get all the other stuff out. So if I would have, in that world, put an agent on that and cut that out, I would have failed at what I was trying to do or struggled. So we took a lens of looking at all of our workers and saying, why does the job exist? What is the job? Should it be human? Should it be digital? Should it be both? Where does it fit in the flow of work? When does this kick in? And what's the motivation of success? And once you qualify all of that and quantify it, then you're just looking at it really differently. You're not looking at how do we implement this and how's the data architected. All that stuff matters. But you're actually saying, what's the worker? What's the labor program? How are we solving the workforce element of this? And some of this comes in from my history of, like, especially with Talent Rover, where we were in 8 countries. And in my mind, and I was on a panel earlier last year and talking about this of, workforce and labor and all of that. The digital workforce for me is not really that much different from opening a new office in a different country and having to figure out how that workforce works.
Brandon, just my observation, what you're sharing with us, there's a couple of things in my mind that I feel like there's a perfect storm, a confluence of events that occurred when you were building this out, and why I think I'm getting where you found this. You were building out, you had to build out scale for your company, for Asymbl. Like, you were like, I need to recruit. Then it was like, what are the skills and roles we need for those people? And then it was like, we're going to try to develop agentic AI capabilities to do that work. So you really had to dial up, not the technology, not the data, not the integrations, et cetera, but more really what's the job to be done for a recruiter.
Well, and why? Like, why does it exist? All of that. At the same time, we didn't want to raise a big venture round. We raised a little bit of money for Asymbl, but not the normal.
Yep.
I was adamant on the company being consistently profitable, and it has been. I was adamant about generating healthy cash flow, so I was never dependent on a funding round. We crushed that as well. But then I was also adamant about, I want to build $1 billion company. How do I do this? And, we've grown 58x in 3 years. Like, it's been
it's a
skyrocketing thing. And we have 170, 180 human workers today. But the only way that I could unlock this stuff is we had to work smarter. We had to think about things in a different way. And with Talent Rover, it taught me the power of workforces in different countries and the economics of how that works. And, we have a big human team in India right now that is awesome. I actually head out there next week to see them. We're going to continue to dramatically invest out there. But the cost of labor from India versus the US is vastly different. Now, the way you interact and the labor laws and the processes and the specialities and all of the things that go into that workforce are different than the workforce we have in the United States. So when we were thinking about this, and when it clicked for me that this is a workforce, I immediately started to apply of like, wait, what happened when I opened in Tokyo? What happened when I opened in Hong Kong? What happened when I opened in Sydney? What happened when I opened in the UK? What happened when I opened in Ireland? What happened when I opened in India? I went through the same process with humans that I'm trying to deploy with digital workers.
So I mentioned earlier, I want to come back to the personas of how you see your digital workforce and how you look at it. But just to recap what we just touched on, in fact, I think it was Mark Benioff and Paulie Sumner and the team over at Salesforce who said this is probably the last generation of executives who are only going to be leading human workers. It's going to be a digital workforce going forward and a hybrid workforce. To recap what I think some of the bullet points, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me, but it's taking the IT out of the equation first, like going at what's the task, what's the job to be done. Can you walk through like what you just shared? Like, give us like the top 3-4 things executives should be thinking about in 2026.
Yeah, the way we approach the program, because we actually have a program for this with helping our clients, it's 3 phases for us. 1, what's the job to be done and the motivation behind the job? You got to get that right. And you got to think through, why. And this gets into, the question about 2025 and all these pilots and proof of concepts and why they all fail. They all fail because the outcome you were seeking is not what you were measuring. Like, we just had a great conversation with a client that did a pilot last year and it was a disaster. not with us, but they just did it. And we're like, give us a shot at this. Let's look at this differently. Let's look at this as, let's use this proof of concept, which is where I think you should be using proof of concepts right now. Let's look at this to give you the belief that this can function as a worker and isn't just an IT project. That is the mission for this phase one, small, 3-week, project with a very specific use case of, let's demonstrate this can act like a worker for you and deliver meaningful, real ROI. Let's do that first. And if we fail at that, you don't want to do this. If we do that, though, I guarantee you your entire mindset and your business will change. Now, the speed of that change is going to depend on how fast you want to go, how much money do you want to spend, how much resourcing, all the other stuff that goes into all of that stuff. But let's get the belief first, because it's what's happened with me. As soon as I believed this was a worker, I looked at everything different. So we're trying to teach that. The second stage is the plumbing, is what I call it. How do you set all this up? That is a straightforward IT process. The third, and probably the most critical, probably even more critical than the belief, is the ongoing coaching and management. You can't set it and forget it. This is also one of the reasons it's not an IT project. You can't leave it alone.
I wanted to ask you about that because I was reading some of your thinking on this, and I was like, wait a second, he's talking about coaching an AI agent. Can you go into that? What does that mean?
I built in ChatGPT last year, or maybe it was 24, I built a marketing assistant GPT. We didn't have a marketing team at the time. It was me. We now have a killer CMO, and it's fun seeing her figure out and learn all of this. But we didn't have a marketing team, but we had a lot of people internally and externally that we needed to create marketing content for. So I built this GPT in ChatGPT, fed it all their brand information, all the stuff, all that, got it really humming well. And I was using it every single day. It was perfect. Full trust. Deploy it to the team. Everyone can go use it, ask whatever questions you want. I sat and forgot it. Oh my God, it's doing what it needs to do. All of a sudden, I started seeing all this crap content. I'm like, what is this? Like, this is not how we talk. This is not what we do. Why is it writing this way? This is not what I told the GPT to do. Did you create your own GPT? No, we're using yours. I didn't create the right guardrails, and I didn't spend the ongoing time to continue to coach it to say, this is good, this is bad. Think of it this way. The business has evolved to do this and all of that. So the output that started to happen was the GPT was starting to learn from everyone else and started to pick up what they wanted to do versus following what I taught it to do. So I had to bring it back in, re-coach it, retrain it, saying, no, don't do that, do this, this is why. But even the words that I just used there, no, don't do this, here is why. That is not IT programming. That is coaching.
So the task, the plumbing, the coaching.
Well, the task and motivation. Don't forget, the motivation, I think, is foundationally critical, because it's the only thing that keeps you honest. Because if not, you'll create a job to be done. That's really not what you're trying to solve for. Going back to that interview thing of agents going to schedule interviews. Well, if I need to talk to the hiring manager, I'm not going to be happy with what this is doing. So motivation is huge, plumbing, and then ongoing coaching and management.
So the other thing that I wanted to ask you about, and this is about job loss. This is a real concern out there. There's a massive concern about job loss, because if and when these agents are deployed at scale, a lot of people are worried about, and it's not the blue collar job. We've heard that it's going to be a lot more white collar jobs, and we're seeing some of that already. But you actually talk about this differently. Talk about, instead of replacing, you actually use the word orchestration, I believe. Going back to your personas of AI and agents, can you just kind of bring that together, not replacing, but actually orchestrating how you see humans and the digital workers coming together?
So my very first job was a bank teller, right? So fresh out of school, bank teller, fun job, did a lot, learned a lot. It was a really good job. When's the last time you saw a human bank teller? So that job changed. There's endless jobs that we can talk about that have been disrupted and changed as the world evolves. And I think the bank teller is the more recent one that I think hits home for people, because everyone goes, oh yeah, like I don't even know the last time I went to the ATM to get cash. So we're in a new industrial revolution where it's not that work is changing, work has changed. Like it's the companies that have started to unlock this, and you're going to start to hear this, I think, at a lot of 26, because I think 24, 25, people were sort of like me, like, okay, what are we doing here? Some people really got it and moved fast like we did. Other people are failed and reapproaching and trying new things. But I think in 26, you're going to start to hear success stories of businesses who have figured this out. And then you're also going to see the gains that they are making. There's no way Asymbl could be sitting where we're at and doing what we're doing if we didn't unlock everything that we unlocked. Like,
is there a change management component to this though, Brandon? Is there, how do you view like the orchestration aspect? Is there a change management that's almost devoid of agentic? You kind of have to have change management anyway when there's change and disruption in a company. How do you infuse like traditional change management and learning, adoption, onboarding of employees alongside now this digital? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, no, and I'm getting to that for you for the orchestration piece, because where I'm going with this is, the bank teller job changed.
Yep.
Businesses that are figuring this out are realizing this works. We need to change. We need to adopt this. But if you go back to what I was saying before, this only works, in my opinion, if you understand why the job exists, if you understand what the success criteria really is for the job, and you understand how to coach and manage these digital workers to deliver on the expectation to achieve both of those things. So all of a sudden, the world shifts. So like our SDR agent that we brought on, Teddy, we also had a human SDR agent, Mitch. Mitch got promoted to an account executive in 9 months. And his first, I think, month out on production, he closed like 11 deals. He's just on fire.
Mitch is a digital employee.
Mitch is a human.
Okay.
Sorry, he's the digital.
I thought. Okay.
So we had one digital, Teddy, and we had one human SDR, Mitch.
Yeah.
So Mitch, part of his job as that human SDR was working with Teddy, coaching Teddy, having Teddy perform. Mitch learned a lot from doing that. So Mitch elevated his career into a new role, and Mitch can still coach Teddy to get Teddy to do what we needed to do. But Mitch has changed his job. It wasn't when he was that SDR just making the phone calls and doing all of that. It's, no, how do I get Teddy to do all that work for me? How do I manage? How do I coach Teddy? And by Mitch managing and coaching Teddy, the digital SDR, Mitch became a better salesperson. Mm-hmm. Mitch became more qualified to understand who we are at Asymbl, what we do, what customers respond with, how to do the job better. So in my mind, what happens in these businesses, and my business is a prime example, it's not so much this huge disruption of you're going to lay off your entire team. There's going to be some of that because the model is going to change. But I think the real focus is going to be, how does your team of people who've been doing these jobs now manage these digital workers to do these jobs? And I've seen it with my company where, one SDR human, Mitch, one SDR digital, Teddy. Well, if Mitch hits capacity because of labor laws and he needs a weekend off and all that, he can only do so much work, I would eventually have to hire more Mitches, more humans to fulfill that capacity need that I have. Teddy, once Teddy figures out how to do his job, I just increase his capacity. Now, Teddy still has to be managed. Teddy still has to be coached. So there's still the dedication of time to managing Teddy. But now Teddy can act as 10 Teddys, 20 Teddys. So this is where the disruption will come as far as what roles are going to go digital versus what are going to be human. But I think the value here is in the humans, you get more specialized. You really understand the why of why a business works or why that role exists, because you have to manage these digital workers for them to be successful. So all of a sudden we're elevating the humans in the business.
Brandon, I don't want to get too esoteric or whatever, but how does Mitch view Teddy? How does the human Mitch view or relate to the digital colleague?
Yeah, Mitch has spoken on this. He's done some interviews. He likes Teddy. Let's think about why. Teddy makes Mitch more effective. Teddy helps crank through a bunch of leads. Teddy helps do a lot of the things that Mitch doesn't necessarily want to do. Teddy can work anytime, day or night. Like, Mitch's role, let's move the sales cycle forward. Let's get deals in front of AEs or salespeople so that they can move forward. Teddy just accelerated Mitch in a way that Mitch would have to work all the time to achieve that.
Does Mitch have a role description and does Teddy have a role description, or is it kind of blurred? How has that evolved?
Yeah, I mean, they both have job descriptions, and Teddy's role is very similar to that of what Mitch's role was as the human SDR. They're doing similar type things, but Mitch's role is to also manage Teddy.
The relationship right there, my head is spinning because I think the persona of a Mitch, an SDR, BDR role, and then bringing out agents alongside them that become kind of partners, if you will, or colleagues, but then also the management side of Teddy. So you have that kind of constant training and ensuring that it's staying within the guardrails or guidelines that you've provided it. Where have you seen where companies automate the wrong work? And I ask this because you even touched on it. It can damage a brand. It can damage a company's performance. Have you seen that, not just some of the things you just shared, but around your marketing agent and making sure that it's being trained, kind of continuous learning? But where have you seen in the market where companies are saying, "Oh, that's an agent," and they're really trying to automate the wrong work?
I think before I get there, I'm going to go there.
Yeah.
I want to finalize the last thought though, because I was about to answer orchestration. So where you were starting to go with Mitch and Teddy and the same job. What is this? This is orchestration. So how does Mitch do his job to leverage these digital workers to allow Mitch to do more, to produce more faster, to deliver more? So our company, 2026, 30% of all productivity that comes out of our company will be through digital workers. Everyone kind of has a digital twin that will help them and assist them. And you would think there'd be a lot of concern about, I'm going to be disrupted. There is extreme demand in our company for everyone saying, how do I get more digital workers faster? How do I get more of these tools? Because we've also set up the motivation for our human workforce to deliver more, to focus on the value the customer is getting, to focus on the bottom line. We're very transparent with our financials, so everyone in the company knows where we're at. We view this as, how do we accelerate? How do we produce more? But yet, how do we still have balance, and how do we still focus on our core values? And the intricacies of that is the workforce orchestration piece. That is understanding what digital labor can do. Why does it exist? What's the motivation? How do you coach it? How do you set it up? With the mindset of, we want to elevate the productivity that the human workers can deliver while maintaining a sense of balance. That's what we mean by orchestration.
Looking at that orchestration concept, I want to ask you about the wrong agents. Why are people why would they failing and kind of trying to automate the wrong work? The reason for that, this orchestration that you speak of Mitch and Teddy, gets into, once Mitch and Teddy have garnered a lead, that's a hot lead, and they pass that lead over to a sales leader, there might be a marketing agent. There might be an agent that's running alongside the sales agent. Do you have yet agent to agent orchestration? Or is there always a human in the loop, if you will?
We do. So one of the use cases that we have for digital workers is helping us produce statement of work for our clients. So we have some pretty complex Salesforce deployments and all that. So we actually have multiple agents working behind the scenes to actually produce that statement of work. They're taking information from a variety of different systems to get there. And that's part of the technical nuance of orchestration, right? So it's not just the strategy, it's the plumbing too, of how do you set all this up and how do they talk to each other and all of that. And there's a technical component that you need experienced experts to come in and help you figure this out.
Is that primarily around data, like accessible data?
I mean, data, think about it. Think about you as a human. You can only make the decisions that you make because of the data that you have stored. And you're going to go seek to find more data. If you can't find the data, you're going to make a bad decision. Digital workers the same way. We can set up the plumbing. We can set up where the data comes from. Is the data fresh? All of those different types of things. So it's foundationally critical. But data alone and data strategy and data architecture, going into the question that you asked about where do companies go wrong with trying to pick the wrong one, this is where they get off the rails. We had a prospect that we were talking with, now a customer, who came to us and said, I want to get this going. Great. The use case they gave us was the most complicated thing we'd ever heard of. We're like, why are we starting here? Well, this is the biggest challenge we have as a company. Has anyone on the human side of your business been able to solve this? No, that's why we want AI to do it. That's great. Let's not start there, because if we start there, it's going to fail and you're not going to have patience for it to fail. But more importantly, you're not going to have the belief that it's going to work. And then we broke down like all of the different things that were in that incredibly complex process and said, what if we solve this one little piece? Just let's start there. Let's give you the belief that this thing can think and figure that piece out. We delivered that. They believed it. And then you build from there. So this is where the pilots, I think, had the biggest challenge of what are you trying to solve and why? Like, let's give you something that gives you, again, the belief that this works and that this can be a worker versus going and trying to solve all your problems on day one or your most complicated problems. And I think, like, if you look at the MIT studies, like the 95% they all fail, all that stuff, I would really question, one, what were they trying to solve? And two, were they just trying to do automation or were they actually trying to deploy a workforce?
I want to ask you about measurement because you're kind of getting right at the heart of what I'm curious about. In 2025, I think it was a shiny new tool. People were trying to deploy an agent, but not really thinking it through with some of the things you're sharing. Executives listening to this and wanting to move beyond pilots into like real tangible value, what should they be measuring when they look at digital labor? How do you see measurement?
Yeah. So, the way that we quantified this for my own company in 2025 was what's the impact that it's making? So there's the cost element, which, the cost of this stuff's getting cheaper and cheaper. LLMs are becoming commodities. I think agents are going to become commodities as well, because that's not really the magic. It's the output that they deliver. That's the magic that requires something more than just the tool itself. But I think for what we did, that again, elevated our school of thought, had us really invest in this, led us to the 30% of all productivity in 2026 is going to be driven by agents, led us to completely changing our P&L, so much so that, we focused on what is the impact of labor to revenue ratio. How can we impact that? I want a 10% reduction in our cost of goods sold on all service delivery, like big, meaty stuff that my team's like, oh yeah, we can achieve that because here's how we're going to do that with all this digital stuff that we're doing. So very, very real tangible stuff that we're getting to now after phase one, which was in 2025. Phase one was let's quantify the impact. If Teddy, my SDR agent, was a human worker, what's it doing? What value is it producing? How many leads is it working with? How many are converting? All the stuff that's there. But what's the other impact? So if Teddy can now do the work of 10 human SDRs, I've just saved the salary, payroll, all the labor cost of 10 human SDRs. I've also saved licensing for the CRM, for Slack, for Gmail, for how do we start to quantify the actual impact that the work that's being done is saving us? Meaning, Teddy saved me from having to hire 10 more SDRs. What's the dollar amount there? India, our engineering team sits in India. Every one of our developers in QA has a digital twin.
And you're sharing some of those reports. I mean, you're sharing some of your wins, right? Publicly,
we saved $5 million last year just from labor costs. And, yes, we didn't hire as many humans as we could have, but the humans that we've hired are way more empowered, way more skilled. We run the risk, and I think this is part of where workforce orchestration is going to also be impacted. We run the risk of we're training really, really solid workers that understand, human workers that understand how to manage this AI worker to drive our productivity through the roof. I'm going to have an attrition problem. I'm going to have people poaching my employees. And I think this is one of the things that's going to be interesting in the human labor market. I think we're going to get into a labor market. There's going to be a war for talent. I think it's going to be a struggle to find the humans that embrace this, that get it, that can hit the ground running with it, because there's only so much reskilling we can do. Reskilling is great. It's going to happen, but there's a time commitment to that. There's a willingness to that, the human wanting to be reskilled, that we're going to go through that shift. So it's one of the reasons why we think our recruiting software is such a vital part of the rest of what we're doing for workforce orchestration, because you got to have the humans that manage the digital workers.
So you're actually touching on something I want to jump into. We'll get into a rapid fire before we finish up, but you just touched on it. What are the skills that are going to disappear, and what skills are going to matter more for the human?
I think, at the highest level, the understanding of why a job exists and what is the success of that job becomes the fundamental thing that you actually have your human workers understanding and managing and delivering. And the benefit of that is not just managing the digital worker. Like, think about that. If you have, we'll just continue to pick on the BDR because our SDR, because that's what we've been talking about. If you have an SDR who deeply understands why the role exists, which I would question how many employees, if you went to them and say, why does this role really exist? Like, do they really have the right answer? Or are they just going to read off what's on the job description? What's the success criteria for this role? Going back to the interview scenario with the recruiter. Well, the success criteria is to get the candidate scheduled. Is it? Or is it to get all the other information that you need to get from the hiring manager to do your job even more effectively?
So in an almost like an elevator type quick, you should be able to very comfortably and confidently speak what that's about.
Yeah. Why the job exists, what makes it successful, and then how do you deliver it?
Yep.
And that's going to make the employee, the human employee, much more effective at that job because they're going to have the clarity and the understanding of what really the expectation is.
Brandon, you said 30% of your team is digital labor?
30% of the productivity that our team will produce in 26, we actually think it's probably going to be 40%, but our Chief Digital Labor Officer, has a KPI of 30%. But we have 170 human employees-ish now. We have 130-ish digital workers now. We're onboarding digital workers at a much faster rate than we are humans. So we were in 2025 and even in 2024 focused on what's the labor percentage of what. We got away from that. We said, who cares about what the labor percentage is? What's the productivity gain that we're getting, which is what we're focused on now.
You're making me more comfortable of using phrases like human employee, AI worker, digital worker. That's been kind of cumbersome for me to speak like that. You're actually giving me a little bit more comfort in that's how you see it. And I think that's really good for me to hear, and I think for our listeners to hear as well. I want to kind of jump into some more practical, tangible, especially for those. And I think you mentioned you've got some new titles that you've kind of developed for this space. We're starting to see Chief AI Officer and other roles. But for the C-suite, or those who are really leading this kind of area for their organization, enterprise, small, medium, large enterprise organization, are trying to deploy AI. It could be within Agentforce, within Salesforce. It could be beyond the walls of Agentforce into all the models that we're talking about. What's the first step they should be thinking about and doing right now?
John, just look at it this way. I don't have a Chief AI Officer. I have a Chief Digital Labor Officer. They are vastly different job descriptions, in my opinion. I want to deploy digital labor in every department across the company. I want these digital workers to be successful. I want them to have measures. I want them to have goals, success criteria. I want them to produce 30% of our productivity in 2026. This is a workforce that our Chief Digital Labor Officer is deploying, managing, and making successful in our business. I'm not just deploying AI. So that context alone for that role, if I just had a Chief AI Officer, the focus, the mentality, the understanding of my business of what that job is would be a vastly different perception.
Would you share your digital, would you share that job description?
I can, yeah, absolutely. It's also interesting, like the background of the person that's in that role. So Shiv, I've known him for 15 years. He launched the Salesforce consulting firm right when I was launching Talent Rover. He was my first development partner. So he helped build Talent Rover's recruiting product. CEO, built a really large, successful Salesforce consulting firm, exited it. I hired a CEO who's built teams, built companies, processes for this Chief Digital Labor Officer role. I didn't hire a CTO, a professional AI, data scientist, all that stuff. Now, Shiv is really technical. He knows his stuff. But I wanted the CEO mindset to deploy digital labor because it's a workforce and not an IT project.
I love that. I think it's really a critical nuance that's super important. One of the things that's come up a lot, Brandon, and I'm preaching to the choir, is just the word trust of AI. And I know you're kind of like Asymbl is really patient zero for you. You guys are working within your company. How do you build this digital workforce, digital labor inside of Asymbl? But you're also working with companies. What if what if trust in AI at a company you're working with is very low? Where do you go with that?
Yeah, it's belief. Like you got to start somewhere, and you got to bring the team with you, and you got to bring them in a way that they understand. Like the example I gave about chief AI officer versus chief digital labor officer. That's a level of trust that I'm building with the company. My belief of what we need to deliver with this. The SDR agent, when we hired him, we were strategic about naming it. Like we have other agents, the recruiter agent we didn't name. We have other agents we named, Volley People Ops, Data Dan, BA Ben, and like there's a bunch of them. We named Theodore, the SDR agent, because we wanted the rest of our human teams to understand what Theodore was, that he's a worker, he's an SDR, he's got a job to be done, all of that. And that really helped them connect the dots. And then it wasn't this aggressive, everyone has to do this right now. It was, let's build like use cases. Let's build success. Let me, as the CEO that everyone's watching, let me show you how I use this. Let me show you what I use it for. Let me break the stigma of like, I spend a lot of my time in GPTs. I get a lot of information. They write a lot of my stuff. That's okay. I still have to read it. I still have to make sure it's correct. I still have to think and strategize and do my job. But if they can help me do 30, 40% more faster, of course I'm going to use it. So that mindset and that working in public, if you will, like I was talking about me posting the conversation I had with ChatGPT with the agent for sales. And I actually posted, a conversation I had with it on LinkedIn about our sales pipeline and how are we set up for Q1 and Q2. I posted that on LinkedIn for everyone to see. That builds trust because I'm not trying to sell you on something that I don't have experience with. And I think this is also the problem we had in 2025. Everyone's an expert. Everyone has an agent. Everyone wants to quick start for an agent, these proof of concepts, and it's going to work perfectly. Everyone wants to slap an agent on it and solve the problem. None of that works. You got to have lived experience, in my opinion. Like we're only able to do what we've done because we've been doing it for a few years and we failed and failed and failed. But we kept going and kept trying and kept changing and pivoting. The epiphany around this is labor, not technology, was radically game changing for us. But we figured it out. And now we can take this lived experience and have conversations like this about like everything we've done to actually break it down in a way where this is not impossible to do, but there's a strategy, just like hiring any workforce is a strategy of what you're going to accomplish, how fast you're going to accomplish it, the investment that you have to make in it, not just setting it up, but coaching it, managing it, making sure it's successful, pivoting, changing, all that stuff. This is where the magic gets in. And this is where I think we're going to start to see in 2026, companies start to unlock this because I think the world realizes AI is here. It's not going away. You got to figure out how you're going to embrace it, how you're going to use it. Because if you don't, your competitors are. But how do you get the team bought in so that they'll actually use it, try it, feel it's okay if it breaks, if it fails, with the mindset of just coach it, teach it to be better. And that builds the trust, to your point, that eventually gets everyone, like my company now, everyone's like, I want more, give me more. They're not concerned about their job being replaced. They're not concerned about the AI not doing something exactly right. They're still accountable for the results they produce. So they still have to review it and like make sure it's accurate and all of that. But if you can accelerate them getting to that answer faster, that's a huge win.
Is there a bottoms up or a top down or both critical? And let me explain what I'm trying to get at. One agent here, one agent there, you build 3 or 4, you kind of bubble up over time. Was that how you really saw the win? Or did you say, no, I need to think about holistically organizational, and then I'll figure out where the agents should be deployed? Help us understand that 30,000 foot level and also down at the ground.
I think it's a really good, great question. It's both. It started at the top with my belief me saying, yes, we're going to do this. I support this. I know it's going to fail in a lot of ways. Let's keep going. Let's treat it as labor, all of that to make it okay. And, we have some core values at the company around bias towards actions and fail fast. They're two of our biggest core values. We also have, ironically, one of our core values is potential of our people. So, as much as we're digital labor focused, again, we're wanting to elevate the productivity our humans can produce, and that's a big part of our potential of our people. But that mindset, that safe space that I created for the company to say, let's figure this out. And then Shift coming on and me saying, figure out where we can use this. Figure out what's agentic, figure out what's an assistant, figure out what's straight up just generative, and like all this stuff. And work with the other business leaders to say, what do you need? Like, what are you thinking? Where can this help you? And then the same type of interaction happened where some business leaders were really reluctant and others were like, let's go try this. But then over time, everyone started to see everyone else's success and everyone's failure. And Shiv's job was to say, where can I make the biggest impact for the business? Where can I help these business leaders really see the ROI of how this is impacting their budgetary needs or their KPIs or whatever? And how do I accelerate that? So we have them in about 10 different functions across the company right now. And some have gone full steam ahead, like engineering was the biggest adopter out of the gate. People ops was the slowest adopter out of the gate. So there's a balance there, but it's this constant push of like, let's talk about this stuff. We have a monthly all staff that we always talk about all the digital workers and how they work. And yeah, it's a process.
Brandon, you're actually bringing new terminology to the conversation. When I hear, and we saw this 20 years ago during the .com era, we saw it during mobile and social media. There was new language being developed. Now we're hearing terms like digital worker. I want to ask you, do you use the term agentic AI or AI agent, or do you shy away from that?
No, we absolutely do. An agent, AI, agentic agent, whatever you want to call it, that's just a form of a digital worker.
Okay.
So we're very conscientious internally and externally that it doesn't matter what kind of digital worker it is. I mean, it does, because it's going to have a different job to be done, different motivation. We're going to coach it differently, all this stuff. But what's the impact it's going to make? And especially when I'm talking external of the company, I don't like talking about agents, not because they're not real and not because they don't have a specific purpose. They're a very powerful digital worker, especially when you can have agents to agents talking with each other and orchestrating things behind the scenes. I mean, incredibly powerful. The problem is you have a lot of people that call everything an agent and say you only get the value if you're using agent, and they're just completely wrong. Our assistants probably deliver more value to us than our agents do, but they're all digital workers.
Yep. Let's go into a rapid fire here. We can wrap up. Quick questions, quick answers. You up for it?
Sure.
Most overrated belief about AI agents?
That's a good one. They are set it and forget it. You can just turn it on, it'll work.
So we saw 2025. What are the biggest mistakes executives are going to make in 2026?
Continue to treat it like IT projects and not labor.
What's one role that will change faster than people even expect?
I mean, I think every role, I think when you're getting into high volume type work, those roles will be the fastest to be impacted, but those are the roles that need the most management over the digital workers to be successful.
Interesting. What about a function that shouldn't be touched yet?
I think that, and this goes back into the strategy of the business. You got to understand your business to answer that question, because it just depends. Like, people ops can be hands off and no, we can't have any AI there. Or it could be like, yeah, we got a lot of questions about handbooks and stuff like that. That's the most important thing that we need to solve for. So that's a strategy question.
I've been describing the last 6 to 12 months as a lot of anxiety, people trying to catch fog in a jar. People aren't sure what to grab onto. And some of the conversation here actually gives me some comfort in knowing how you're approaching it. There's kind of orchestration, digital human collaboration, the human actually asking for more, asking to adopt and adapt to the digital colleague, the digital partner, if you will. For those that are still feeling that anxiety, Brandon, what should leaders say to their team, to their employees that are often right now, to be honest with you, they're being kind of scared about their job? What should leaders tell them?
I think it's a grounding, which is funny because it's an AI term too, but it's grounding in what are we trying to accomplish and why are we trying to accomplish? And I think the mindset of thinking about it as labor Not only does it help you execute more effectively, it's a concept everyone understands. When you start talking about job descriptions and motivations and coaching and management, we all get that. Use those words. And then I think all of a sudden your team will go and respond in a way sort of like my team did of, okay, I get this. Like, give real examples like I've done with interviews and with the SDR and all of that. Like, here are tasks that we're trying to do. Here are jobs we're trying to get done. Humanize it and don't make it such a tech project. I think that'll dramatically change how people think. And then also, like, what I did was try to create a safe space of like, where's this going and why? We're going to try, we're going to fail. This may work for us. It may not. It might be all of like, who knows, but we're going to give it its goal and create that safe space for people.
I know there's a lot of reports out there about which industries, but what have you seen? What industries are adopting this really quick and like leaning in, and which ones are a little bit more nervous? Is it regulated? Is it retail? Like where do you see industries?
Yeah, we're starting to, it's been a fun journey for us because we haven't been selling the digital labor side for more than, I don't know, 6 to 9 months or so. But now that's our fastest growing side of our company, as you would kind of expect with everything that's going on. And we're starting to see just kind of every industry, from retail. We had a vegetable type company right now where they sell a specific type of vegetable working with us to do this, which I was like, oh, that's a really cool use case. Tech, all of it. So, we've been focused a lot on the staffing industry. We've been focused around corporate recruiting. So our lens is a little bit blurred because we've been seeing that. We play primarily in the Salesforce ecosystem. So we also have that bubble that we're in. But even with that, like the past 6 months has just been kind of across the board. I think, we're seeing more laws kick in. January, some new laws kicked in Illinois and in Texas and California. So we're going to see more regulation around. So I think that'll be interesting to see how some of that stuff plays out. Similar to like what GDPR did in Europe and the impact that had and all of that. So I can't say a specific one or the other because we're just getting inundated with all kinds. And it's a fun journey because, again, for us, it's less about the industry and more about the type of labor that's being utilized.
Yeah, I mean, you're driving that point home. I love it. I think it's really spot on. I think it's on point. Last question here, just around future projections. What does this landscape look like in 2029?
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to try to predict what's going to happen in 2 weeks, much less 6 months or a year versus 29 or 30. I do think companies will eventually figure out that this is a type of workforce. I do think you'll see labor programs adapted to this. I compare it a lot to globalization and international workforces and how we've adapted, and even things like when we were opening all those offices at Talent Rover, there was not such a thing as employer of record systems then. We had to open an entity in those countries to employ labor in those countries.
Right.
And now there's like Deal and Remote and Rippling and all these companies that are employers of records. Like that's a service they provide. Again, technology, evolution, all of the things. So I think you're going to see the world adapt more to it as a workforce. What that ultimately means, we'll see. I mean, we're obviously betting on that being the case with what we're doing as a business, but we're also betting on ourselves because we're seeing the value that we're getting because we're actually doing that.
Well, Brandon, thank you so much. Great stuff. Anything we didn't cover that you want to touch on before we wrap?
I mean, I could talk about this for days, but no, I thought this was really great. I hope, we kept it so that non-technical folks get an understanding of it. But, you brought up this sense of overwhelm and sense of anxiety. My best advice for that is, again, take a step back. Think of it as labor. Like, approach it that way. Any of the vendors you're talking to, whoever's trying to sell you stuff, everyone's trying to sell AI right now. Approach it as if you're going to hire a new employee to do this job. That should feel more comfortable that you know how to do that already. And it will lead you to ask better questions about the output, what's going to happen, why it's going to happen. And then once you get that solidified, then figure out the technical components.
I think that's really sound advice. I mean, you get into like lucid flow diagrams and integration and technology for sure, but the founding principles of what you talk about is not that.
Yeah, and it's going to help you. Like, do you need to focus on data? Do you need to focus on systems? Like, all the technical stuff will come, but if you ground it in what's the job you're trying to get done and why first,
Yeah.
Then as you're getting pitched all the different services and all the different technologies and stuff, then you can actually start to make sense of what goes first and why.
That resonates with me. I think the other thing that resonated with me is when I asked you about bottoms up or top down, and really needing both. You can't just mandate. You can't just do it from the ground up. I think when you deploy an individual agent somewhere out in an ecosystem, if it's a 200,000 person company across the globe with multiple regions and languages, and you start blowing up agents everywhere, you're going to run into problems. So there needs to be top down, but there also is that bottom up. So I love some of that. Also, this whole digital workforce mindset is brilliant. Brandon Metcalf, Asymbl, thank you so much. Where can they find you? Where should they go if they want to learn more?
So Asymbl is ASYMBL. So that's our website, asymbl.com. I'm big on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's probably the easiest place to go find me and connect with me. I'm on Twitter, but I never really use it, but you can reach me there as well. So thanks for having me on. This was great.
Brandon, if I reach out to you, am I going to get you or am I going to get your digital?
We'll find out.
All right, man. Listen, I'll let you go, but thanks so much for joining.
All right, John. Thanks much.
Listen, if you enjoyed this episode with Brandon, please follow along. Join us on Substack. Join us on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. 2026, I think as we just heard from Brandon, is where experimentation ends, leadership begins. Thanks for joining, and stay curious.